Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're going to be having quite a long video talking about some SSF Demi friendly builds. Before we get into that though, I just want to make a little request. My boy Carve, you should all know him, and if you don't, you need to get that shit together, follow him and stuff. His webcam broke and he can't afford a new webcam. So, if you haven't used your Amazon Prime yet this month, or you were going to sub to me, sub to him this month. Only for this month. We're not buying him a car, but like, if we could get him a webcam, feels good, man. Like, he deserves this shit. So yeah, if you were gonna use like Amazon Prime or anything on me this month, for this month, don't use it on me. Use it on Carve. Then go back to supporting your local pleb. Get him a new webcam. Get him back in the Bay class. Feels good, man. And also, I just want to quickly show off. I finally tidied up my like gaming area a little bit, and we made a nice little like PoE shrine with some nice crack in the wall, with some old, stuff I've collected through supporter backs and stuff over the years. So we've got a signed Atlas. This is an old closed beta 0.10.8 skill tree with some signed Ascendancy work and all the relevant things. And because of that, I am blessed with good RNG going into FlashBack, and I can guarantee getting myself an Impulsor. Now, before we talk about the builds, there's still one more thing I want to talk about. There's this fallacy with SSF that if you play SSF, you can never play builds because you'll never have items. And I keep seeing people saying that, but Tarke, I can never do it because I'm never going to have the items. I can never play the builds I want to play. Blah, 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 blah. Complete BS. If you play SSF semi-regularly for like a month, these are just some items I've collected over like a month of play, and again, hardcore, I've ripped a lot of really cool shit. You find that you can actually play most builds. You won't be able to play every single build day one the second you want to play it, but most people have like 5 or 10 different builds they want to play. SSF is perfect for that. If you've got like 10 different builds, you're like, oh, I'm not sure which one I want to play, you just let SSF guide you through drops, and then you play what drops you, then you start collecting other things. So like, yeah, oh, I've got a Vis Mortis. I guess I'll go play a Vis Mortis build. I've had like 3 Namahu's Flames. It's a pretty common item. Pirate's Pens, Gloomfangs. I've had like 2 or 3 Anne's Heritage, really good shield. And it lets you use lots of like very cool tier 2, tier 3 uniques, like Arne's Heritage, for example. Arne's Heritage is really powerful, getting that max res and that Palmer Onslaught, but you very rarely see it. I've had like 8 fucking Feastbinds as well. Bestiary is very good for this, and Flashback even better. Flashback is going to be great for just getting access to lots of like really cool old dinky, like Barons and whatever, unique items that you know are very powerful but you haven't built around in a very long time. Well, if you just play, you'll start collecting the gear, and then you can target farm quite easily through div cards, etc. Set up your loot filter for div cards, and you will be A-okay. So yes, SSF, if you haven't tried it, give it a proper try before you dismiss it. Now let's talk about some builds. Before we get into the builds, I want to quickly show you what's the difference between a realistic and an unrealistic character, since when it comes to path of building warriors, people like to be very unrealistic, even in Trade League, but for SSF it's very important you have realistic gear ideas. So this, for example, is a build I would like to play. This is a Scorching Ray Diadus Impulsor Elementalist. Yeah, it's a bit memey, but it works. And the only items this build actually needs is a Diadus, which is fairly common and can be target farmed through the Battleborn div card through farming Volcano. Volcano is a good map to farm anyway because it gives you Combs cards. And an Impulsor, as previously mentioned, I'll be getting thanks to Bex retweeting my stuff on the Twitter. So that's basically the seal of approval. You will log in and get an Impulsor day 1, right? So when it comes to getting rares, go for like tier 2/tier 3 life and mana values. In this case, this is a Mon build. Yes, the resists are a bit iffy, but when you have this many rares, just cap your res. Just like, is it realistic? For example, you see 2 rings here with no resist on them. Capping res won't be an issue at all for this build, but you just want to put in some like benchmark life and mana values. And if you stick to mostly tier 2, tier 3 rolls, stick to like 2-3 stat jewels, don't ever exceed that. If you do that, you get a decent idea of like what your defense will be. So for example, you'll see this is a Minerva Matter build with 5.3k life, with 2k unreserved Mind of Matter on top of that. So you can go, okay, yeah, that's a very solid, pretty realistic League starter with a level 90 tree, with, pretty, pleb tier jewels, nothing that crazy. Yeah, okay, that is like a realistic build. So that's like the kind of stuff you want to be going for, okay? I'll also leave links to all of these paste bins down below, but these are going to be mostly skill tree guides, and I'll give a few like pointers, and just come up with a gear yourself based on what you need. Again, realistic tier 2, tier 3 rolls. So let's jump into some of the other elementalists. So this is a volatile dead and or cremation elementalist. All of these builds have been planned around not having Uberlab, because SSF, you can't guarantee having an early Uberlab. So you don't want to play a build which has to have all of its trials completed within a few days. You'll get there eventually, but that's the point. Eventually. So, a few things you'll notice I've done on a lot of my elementalists. I route through the cast speed rather through the spell damage. Again, these are like racing-centric builds. So your main goal is to go quickly, not to kill, you know, Uber Elder. You don't really care about losing some damage if it makes your character feel smoother and feel faster. So that's the trade-off you make. When you can get cast speed, go for it. Very basic idea. You'll see a very similar kind of tree to the last one. Get all the fire damage, get all the mana good stuff, get jewels when you have good jewels, and yeah, you input gear as you need. But you can see that, you know, if you've got a, you know, a 2k mana, 4k life build, then for a league starter, that's like as no gear, you'll be at A-OK. You want to have like 5k life, 2k mana on a mom, good to go, you'll be A. One important thing to notice, Elementalist is pretty budget, since you can get the early Paragon of Calamity. The reason why this is very nice for SSF starting, they cannot take reflected elemental damage. If you're a pure elemental build, this means you don't have to reroll maps early, and you don't have to like waste maps. This is very good when the start, when you're trying to build up a base. Being able to run every map mod is very beneficial to you. Also, having the early leech, you'll eventually get leech through just doing a couple of lab runs and getting leech enchant on boots. SSF getting leech enchant on boots is very realistic. It's very realistic. It's the case of just do like 10 runs, you'll get it. You don't need to be summoning Uberlab either. You can very easily just knock out either Cruel or Merciless Lab. Cruel Lab still gives you 0.4% leech. That is plenty fine. So you can just like zoom through that super quick, knock it out very safe, and just stick the second you get like a solid enchant, be it leech enchant, attacking cast speed if you've killed recently, regen if you've been hit recently, if you're playing a regen style build. Another very important one is for totem builds, trap builds, and mine builds. Crit chance if you haven't crit recently. If you're playing a trapper, a miner, or a totem build and you want to get your crit up a little bit, that boot enchant is a very easy way of getting like 100% crit chance for free. And for the amount of time it would take you to do it, super easy, super S-fix. Once you had your Uber Lab, you'd eventually want to respec into Beacon of Ruin. And if you managed to get an Impulsor early, you would take Beacon of Ruin over taking Mastermind of Discord. One important thing to note, Pendulum of Destruction is actually a very strong node and is very undervalued if you are playing an AoE build. If anyone has ever played an AoE build with this node, you really notice when it's there. It doesn't always help you, it's not always active, but it does actually boost your map clear quite significantly, and it sometimes gives you some damage for bossing. It's a bit annoying with the way it rotates, but it's actually very helpful, very smooth for bossing. So yes, that is just a very basic example tree. You could use Volatile Dead, Cremation, any setup you want, soot in the stuff, but that's like the base you want to be going for. Right. Then we have a Crit Blade Vortex Elementalist. For anyone who's going for softcore, I would 100% recommend this build as a softcore SSF or Trade League starter. Mathel has played a very similar build to this before. A few of my friends have played this build in SSF and absolutely swear by it. Very solid, easy leveling. Great boss damage, will destroy all the early content. Even without the Impulse, it has very good clear. Once again, the Pendulum of Destruction really pulls through, and once again, the Paragon of Calamity will really help your early map sustain until you get your character fully geared up. Getting an Impulsor is going to be the key thing to this build, so this is something which is mostly there for Trade League, but if you go for a Herald of Ice, Herald of Lightning setup, that is more than enough. Also, another thing to note, for SSF, plan your builds around 5 links, don't plan your builds around having an early 6 link. Your Herald setup for this kind of a build, just have a Herald of Ash. Herald of Ash converts your Fizz over to Fire. If you eventually get an Essence Worm, also run a Hatred, but you'll be fine with just triple Heralds to start. Herald of Ice, Culling Strike, Ice Bite, Onslaught. This is a very nice way of generating both Frenzy and Onslaught. for smooth mapping and just passive giving you that good stuff. And then Herald of Thunder, Innovate, Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark. You can swap where you have the Curse on Hit. I generally prefer having Curse on Hit on Assassin's Mark over Herald of Ice, since you'll have it up for bosses and rares. If you've killed something recently, you'll keep the Herald of Thunder, like, shock effect going for, like, 5 seconds afterwards or whatever it is. That means you'll reliably always be cursing the stuff that you care about. Having Herald of Ice for the shitty white mobs, you don't need the curse on that because they just fall over anyway. But yeah, this is something that I'd kind of recommend. There are a lot of other things you can do, but yeah. That is a core base tree. And all of your, like, core base trees, you want to be floating, like, level 90, level 80 is, like, your base structure arena. Also, I'd highly recommend taking Purity of Flesh. 6 points feels bad to a lot of people, but there'll be a lot of extra random floating chaos damage with all the fancy league stuff being active. Very good, very underutilized set of nodes over here. Also, one thing I will notice, if you're playing a Elementalist and you take Legion of the Primordial and Elimarzer, and you're getting a lot of bonuses from your golems, if you take this routing, for 1 point you can get a very nice quality of life boost from your minions having the regen. With your minions being immune to elemental damage and having this passive regen, you can just have them linked into a high level cast from damage taken, and they will always be active. Another thing you can do, and something I plan on doing on one of my other builds, to save points, is have one Ghastly Jewel. Ghastly Jewels are the minion-centric abyssal jewels, and you want to roll one for life or energy shield if you're a CI build. Minions regenerate some life per second, that's the core thing, and then you've got 3 other good things you can hit. You can hit, for example, minions have a chance to taunt on hit, minions have a chance to blind on hit, and minions have a chance to hinder on hit. Some of these are based on attacks, some of these are based on spells. These will be better or worse depending on what golem setup you're going for, but it's a very easy way of fitting in some nice quality of life into your build and some pseudo defense for, 1 to 2 points. And for this rooting, for example, I would have to take 2 points to get this node. So for 2 points, I could get a jewel, get that in, boom, sorted. So that is just one very nice thing I'd recommend to a lot of people. For people wondering why I recommend Elementalist so much in an SSF environment, Elementalist is rather squishy when it comes to hardcore, so doesn't see that much play, and it's one of the Essences which scales the hardest with gear. It's a very YOLO strat, but if you can hit something like Poet's Pen, something like Impulsor, then you will just fly miles ahead of your competition. It's very YOLO, and it can have very good early leveling, but you just got to take the trade-off there. Another build I'd recommend is this is just a generic Inquisitor tree. This is a Spark tree. If you don't want to play Spark, you can drop this section here, and then you just copy the other generic crit spellcaster routing. You do that, you suddenly have enough life plus Mom, and then if you want to play EK, just grab that 3-point jewel, boom, you're done. But yeah, you'll notice a lot of these generic crit caster trees look very similar, and the reason why I swear by generic crit casters is they're generic, they don't require any gear to get going, and for early Ascendancy points, the first and most important one will be Instruments of Virtue to get that moving attack and cast speed steroid, and then Inevitable Judgment. You'll get Augury eventually, but yeah, that's very solid, very straightforward. This is kind of a meme, but this is definitely a pretty easy SSF win if you can be bothered to deal with the world's most obnoxious leveling. This is a Mind Over Matter Kinetic Blast Guardian. The tree is based off the Mind Over Matter Wonder Tree that you've probably seen either Rise or the original Red Eye, who Rise copied setup going for it. The reason why Guardians are actually like pretty decent for this is it has quite a lot of nice survivability, which will make the early leveling less obnoxious. And when you got this going, you will be so much faster than any other Guardian mapping that if you can get it going, you just kind of win on Guardian. There are very few Guardians early off in SSF for fairly obvious reasons, since Guardian's mostly a support or a low life class. Prayer of Glory gives you a attack, cast, and movement speed steroid on Warcry. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough at the moment. Very nice, and it gives you a Warcry instant steroid. If you're Mind Over Matter, this is very nice for Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry gives you a bunch of mana regen, a bunch of free damage. And If you're lucky enough to get the Threshold Jewel, it gives you damage you take as mana regeneration. Very, very powerful. Harmony of Purpose gives you Power, Frenzy, and Endurance charges on hit, 10% chance. With KB, this is Perma, Power, Frenzy, and Endurance charges. This is obviously really solid. Power charges make your crit chance way more consistent, and ones have a very high natural base crit. Frenzy charges are just more damage, attack, and cast speed. And Endurance charges are nice, just steady mitigation and defense. You combo this with Bastion of Hope. Bastion of Hope is really, really sleeper. It gives you 50% chance to block for 2 seconds every 5 seconds. And if you've attacked recently, you gain 10% block chance. And if you've cast a spell recently, you gain 10% block chance. If you're playing a KB character in like Underground Sea or something, you're quite regularly using the odd Flame Dash here and there to jump over ledges, or just during your movement. Since you gain steroids through attack and cast speed by pressing Rallying Cry every now and again, you get quite a lot of actual like mobility and a lot of survivability through Bastion, and it's actually really solid. You can also take Time of Need if you get your Uber Lab, and this will give you reduced curse effects on you. This makes your gearing easier for any weakness, and it just means that curses have less effect, which is pretty nice, depending on the map mods. And it gives you a regen every 5 seconds, which is also very powerful. And yeah, it's just, it's not the best. Obviously, I'm not saying Guardian KB is the best thing in the world, but it's surprisingly decent, although rather obnoxious to level. And has a lot of life and mana regen, making it very, very safe once you do get it actually off the bat. ED Trickster is what I would be playing if I was starting day 1 of the race. This will have a lot of competition, but is a very safe and very easy ascendancy to pull off. And ED Contagion requires absolutely nothing. If you haven't seen already, Rise has made an absolutely amazing ED Contagion leveling guide. And to be honest, that video is some of the best Path of Exile content I've seen recently. It's really good. I'll also leave a link to that down below. But yeah, ED Contagion, 100% recommend it. This is just a base tree to go off of. Other things you can do based on this core level 80 tree depends mostly on your gear and what you need. If you happen to get a Witchfire Brew, then I'd recommend coming along and grabbing Whispers of Doom and taking this damage as well. For this build, I would recommend, even though you're Mind Over Mana, using a single Blasphemy. A lot of the Mind Over Mana builds I am choosing to run this league run like one small reservation, or be it a 35% Blasphemy or like a 25% Herald. Running one small reservation really isn't that deep, especially if you then actually invest in a couple of mana nodes and, you know, consistently aim on getting mana on all of your gear. So that's one way you can go. So you'd get the second curse through the flask, and then you'd still run the one Blasphemy. So that's like the more damage-centric option. If you want to just have more survivability, you can just invest into more mana. Pretty ezzy-pezzy. If you want to really go in, you could come down to Psalm Life and get a bunch of Psalm Life, then get the Potency of Will, and then get the 3-point Mana Jewel. This is obviously kind of what you go for if you're like pushing the very high 90s. You then maybe drop these points over here. The reason why I route through the elemental damage here, this is still 6% all res per point, and it's just the most efficient routing of this section of the skill tree, and is just very, very good. 6% all res, very nice SSF environment. And I don't take these AoE nodes because once you have a level 20 Contagion with quality, with increased AoE gem, it no longer gives you any air of effect. So yeah, this one still doesn't give you 1 point, so you take that, but you do not take these 2 points. Also, if you're using Blight, area damage does not scale Blight damage. So yeah, don't take these 2 points for your ED, Contagion, Blight, whatever builds. Not worth running. Going into a very safe option, this is what I would recommend to most people, to be honest, and this is what I did in Mayhem, and this is what I'm very much leaning towards, which is the good old tried and tested GC mines into KB mines. This is a pretty trimmed down tree. Very basic rule of thumb, you know, so the trees of these are very, very similar. The reason why I recommend transitioning from Glacial Cascade into KB, Glacial Cascade has a very easy time doing all of the bosses, doing all of the early content. The survivability can feel a little bit weak to start. To compensate for that, I recommend something a little bit unorthodox. Take Bomb Specialist to get the early mine laying speed and the increased damage, but then get Pyromaniac and Born in the Shadows before taking Demolition Specialist. Take this from your Uber Lab. Yes, having the mine arming speed is really nice. Yes, having the AoE is really nice. If you're playing softcore, great. If you're playing hardcore, though, you'd much rather have Born in the Shadows. You'd much rather have Pyromaniac. This will keep you alive. The one bad thing about miners is their defense can be a bit iffy while you're getting them going. I would very much stress go for this setup. This will make you feel so much better playing a GC or a KB mine character. Yeah, that is the core skill tree. One important thing you want to rush Clever Construction. Your mines cannot be damaged for 5 seconds after being placed. This is very crucial. Definitely rush that hard. And again, pretty bog standard. Get yourself some nice mana, life gear. When it comes to mana cost, you go mind over matter. You can run a Clarity if you want to. I wouldn't run a Hatred unless you have an Essence Worm. When it comes to KB, I would probably recommend running a single Herald Device unlinked. Herald Device does not proc from your KB killing things because you're using mines, but it will give you very reliable, very realistic shatters and will make the build feel far smoother. It gives so much damage for so little reservation, I would always 100% use it. And again for KB, same deal, you know, take this last. Take these nodes. Since you're probably on a 5 link, this just saves you the peer support gem. If you're not taking these nodes, run the peer support gem. But yeah. Pretty bog standard, pretty straightforward. You don't need attacking cast speed because you just run. To make the mobility feel a little bit better, I would highly recommend having a phase run, faster casting, and then if you can get one, enhance setup. One other thing you can do, if you get the Lunaris or Solaris shield, that gives +2 to active level supported gems. If you put phase run and enhance in that, your character will fly. And yeah, phase run is really nice. I think I've got a character which I can show you what it looks like. Just a random character I died earlier in the league with that was messed around with staffs. Phase run is absolutely crucial to any build feeling not terrible. Even just unlinked, you do want to have faster casting and other stuff on it. Let's see, where is my phase run? There it is. It's also a great way of proccing your Arcane Surge. If I can remember what it looks like. There you go. Yeah, you have something here which gives you a nice little 43% movement speed without enhance. Ideally, you'd have enhance on there. And you just run through, and it gives you enough mobility that you can just proc it to get you from pack to pack to pack. And yeah, for a character which doesn't have Onslaught or anything fancy, that's pretty good move speed. Also, it makes enemies less likely to target you, which if you're playing like a totem build or whatever, is really nice. You can just run through mobs, and it just feels really good to play. Stuff's just like, wait, there's a guy there? Huh. So I would highly, highly recommend phase run for those kinds of builds. And that's basically that. When it comes to getting a very easy wand, you don't need Piscators. There is a trick you can do where you collect Topaz Flasks. I would recommend putting Topaz Flasks highlighted on your SSF filter if you're playing a Wander. You can take a blue wand with a tier of flat lightning and sell it to the vendor with a Topaz Flask, and it will upgrade the flat lightning roll all the way up to tier 2. That is how I crafted my wand that I used to getting level 100 in Mayhem. If I bring up my PoE profile real quick, I can show you what it looked like. And yeah, a lot of what I did in that race was just messing about, crafting wands. But to be perfectly honest with you, this is really all you need. Just get that nice flat lightning roll and a crit chance. That's it. You just need 2 mods. You don't need attack speed because mines don't use the attack speed roll. Just flat damage, crit chance. If you can get multi, great. If you can get wed, great. But those are the only 2 things you need. Really easy, really straightforward. And then let's jump into a couple more builds. You can also do CI Lightning Trap. If you were to play a Trapper with no gear, I would recommend Lightning Trap, and I would recommend going CI. Waggles made a really good video on this, and crafting CI gear is actually very easy in SSF. You're going to be naturally chancing Sadist Guard bases for a Tinker Skin, etc. And when you do that, you very regularly hit the flat Energy Shield evasion roll. And if you just take a random piece of Energy Shield base gear with tier 2 or tier 1 energy shield flat. Just go over and craft 70% energy shield. Instant, you have a solid chest piece, you have instant easy gear. Haku crafting makes getting good budget ES gear super easy. Super absolute face roll. Arc Mines is another pretty solid option. If you don't want to play GC Mines because you're a bit bored of it, but you still want to have a solid mine character before you transition into KB, go with Arc Mines. Your tree will look pretty similar. All these trees look pretty identical. The nice thing about Arc Mines is it does actually feel safer, in my opinion, than GC on a bad budget. I would also probably recommend taking these nodes eventually. Mined Detonation Area increases like the targeting range. If you're playing an Arc Mine build, you will really notice the difference between your character having and not having these nodes. Basically, when you press Detonate Mines, if there isn't a nearby target, your mines just fizzle out and do nothing. If you have these, your Arc will off-screen stuff. Really nice for clearing breaches. Feels super solid. Single target isn't as good as GC Mines, but it's good enough. And you can also use Ball Lightning Mines as a single target swap. If you YouTube Ball Lightning / Arc Mines, you can see plenty of people killing Shaper and Elder with it. It's actually a pretty good build, and it's a decent excuse to use the new Ball Lightning MTX. Going into some more generic free wins, Assassin is very underrated. The way you take your points for Assassin, get Opportunistic first, then get Ambush and Assassinate, then get Unstable Infusion last, then from your Uber Lab grab Deadly Infusion. The reason why I take Deadly Infusion last, Deadly Infusion is at its best once you have all the power charges, and that requires being a higher level. So, yeah. Also, Unstable Infusion is nice, but it's not that great if you're using just like a Herald of Ice Assassin's Mark instead. Both of these will be far more noticeable power spikes, and both of these give you better clear and defense, in my opinion. So Opportunistic gives you movement speed if you've killed recently. Again, this is a race. You're racing. You want fast map clear. You're not caring about one-shotting bosses. So you want the best burst damage and movement speed, not the best sustained damage. This is sustained damage. It also gives you some slight mitigation against Reflect. I still would never run Reflect maps on an Assassin, because the second you don't crit, you kill yourself. A bunch of free damage against single target bosses, and a lot of nice defense against crits for single target bosses. Ambush and Assassinate guarantees you'll always reliably be critting enemies on full life if you go into the configuration. Where is the node? There we go. So, crit chance 35% is the enemy on full life. Crit chance 69%. You're basically crit capped with that one node. Really solid, really nice for early budget gearing. You'll just be going through one-shotting all the trash, no problem whatsoever. So definitely get these two first. Get this set up last. And it's a generic Freeze Pulse or Frostbolt character. Freeze Pulse and Frostbolt are good at different things. And to be honest with you, which one you play is mostly personal preference. And also, GGG released the Arctic Freeze Pulse within the week, please. So let me show you something very quickly. So if you're running Frostbolt with no MTX, very clean visual, very clean sound. Everyone swears by the Frostbolt MTX because the Frostbolt MTX looks fucking awesome. The problem with the Frostbolt MTX, that noise you'll either love, or if you're playing this character to 100, will drive you insane. In much the same way Freeze Pulse has a similar kind of issue. Freeze Pulse has a very distinct sound and visual. For me personally, the current Freeze Pulse is actually just a little too bright for my eyes. I have very bad light sensitivity to that shade of like neon blue. So Freeze Pulse MTX please, so I can play Freeze Pulse in the race. I need it to come out for the 7th, GGG. And also Freeze Pulse is annoying targeting. So with Freeze Pulse, you want to be Freeze Pulsing close to your character to get a nice even spread. Since it no longer shotguns, you don't need all of them to hit the same target. But if you're shield charging, for maximum efficiency shield charge, you want to be shield charging away from your character, but then freeze pulsing close to your character. And that's just very clunky and can lead to like silly mistakes. So I would personally currently rather use Frostbolt without MTX over Freeze Pulse. Even though Freeze Pulse is 1% higher base crit, it has better damage effectiveness, and just feels better without threshold jewels, etc. When it comes to getting threshold jewels in SSF, just mule them. Leveling a character to Act 5 doesn't take more than a few hours. It can take, 2 seconds, or it can take 10 hours, depending on how skilled of a racer you are. But in a 1 month or 3 month race, you can afford a couple of hours. Your character feels substantially stronger. But yeah, pick Freeze Pulse or Frostbolt accordingly. Very solid tree. Don't need to explain too much. Get the mana stuff. It's mom. Run a single Herald of Ice curse on here. Assassin's Mark Ice Bite. If you really don't need the Assassin's Mark because you're crit capped and your power charge capped, once you have your Mark Ascendancy and all that stuff set up, you could run a Poacher's Mark for more reliable frenzy charges. You could run a Warlord's Mark for better map sustain. You could run all sorts of different things. Try it out. See which one you prefer. Then going into it, this is a Assassin KB character. This will be the fastest map clear you'll get on a SSF Assassin. Much like the Guardian, the leveling feels pretty obnoxious. I would recommend leveling this build as just Frostblades or Molten Strike to start. Would definitely 100% recommend for softcore players. For hardcore players, you might want to do like Freeze Pulse, then transition into this. Again, going mind over matter. You can run a single Herald, no problem. If you get an Essence Worm, you can like a Wrath or something through there. And again, same strategy. Just use Topaz Flask to craft a decent base wand. In this case, you will want good attack speed. You're getting your Mana Leech through this one node here. You're getting your Life Leech through this one point here. You've got Point Blank for single target damage. You still just use Kinetic Blast for everything. Use either a knockback setup or a projectile weakness setup to just push enemies against walls. You can also use Decoy Totem, put them next to a wall, and you just absolutely destroy them. Would 100% recommend this. 100%. Super, super solid. Just a little bit rough to get off the early bat. Then this is probably the safest / most enjoyable / most consistent when you're going to get an SSF by just playing a lot, and that is the Sunder Pathfinder. Yes, I do think that for Sunder-based rangers, Deadeye is best. Deadeye sees way more competition than Pathfinder does. Pathfinder is criminally underrated. When it comes to the order of your Ascendancy points, you'll take Nature's Adrenaline first. It gives you nice movement and attack speed steroid, makes them feel much smoother. You then take Master Alchemist for the ailment immunity, and then you take Veteran Boa from your Uber Lab. You basically just go through, take everything which gives you attack speed. When it comes to crafting gear for this, have a armor / evasion based centric loot filter. Just try and get decent like tier 3, tier 2 life, flat fizz, attack speed rolls on your gear. Good to go, good to go. One random, very common unique I will highly recommend is Duresso's Defiance. Duresso's Defiance is a pretty nice way of getting early onslaught and endurance charges. You'll eventually want Hemophilia gloves, and I would recommend chancing for Hemophilias. That is like your go-to. Once you get this item, your build pops the hell off. I personally am not a fan of the AoE on Sunder Crew. If you are a fan of the AoE on Sunder Crew, change your routing to get Templar AoE. I'd much rather just heavily invest into attack speed, life, nodes, which can be nice flask sustain. These plus Pathfinder, your stuff is always active, super safe, super consistent, solid life values. You have way more options of where you want to go from here. If you want more attack speed, then you can get attack speed here, you can get attack speed here, you can get attack speed here and get this. Get attack speed here, grab all of this. If you get a pure talent jewel, you can go into Duelist Start to get even more attack speed, and go into here for some AoE. You've got loads of options, super versatile. You can come down this way for attack speed. This is going around axes. If you got maces, get the mace nodes. Very, very straightforward. If you want to come up to Templar stuff, then, come up to Templar stuff. Change the point slightly, go around like that way. And then maybe also fit in a Devotion and drop some of the other fluffy points I have elsewhere. But yeah, Sunder is Pathfinder. It's pretty straightforward. Easy game, easy win. And then finally, the Chieftain or Volatile Dead Cremation. I'm a big fan of Volatile Dead and Cremation at the moment. When it comes to your lab setup, Rush, Hinakora, Death's Fury. This gives you Fire, Leeched as Life. It gives you some increased strength, and it gives cover rare or unique enemies in Ash. and this just gives you some fire pen. We don't use the Fizz to Fire conversion, sadly, although you can very easily play Chieftain Blade Vortex. Chieftain Blade Vortex is a very solid start. It does a lot of damage. I just personally don't want to be that close to mobs in hardcore, so I'd rather play like Volatile Dead or Cremation. Then you grab this for some nice sustain. And then you can either grab this, or if you want just raw deeps, take that, drop like a Decoy Totem or a Scorching Ray Totem on bosses, sure, but this will give you much nicer map sustain. Again, racing in hardcore is all about nice map sustain. You're not doing these races if you want a Demi to fight, you know, Uber Elder and shit. But very straightforward, exact same thought process as the Elementalist setup. Stuff to look out for, if you are going to go for Cremation as your pure single target, you can weapon swap into a Sire of Shards. You can very easily farm the div cards in a couple of hours in Lunaris Temple 2 in Act 8. Super super easy. And the reason why I'd recommend Chieftain is a very popular ascendancy. It's very, very popular, don't get me wrong. But most Chieftain players play Ancestral Warchief, and Ancestral Warchief has the clear speed of a potato. So, yeah. You'll be fine. Even though Volatile Dead isn't the fastest clear in the world, it's a bit more interesting. It's a bit safer, in my opinion. And it has better map clear. So you'll just out-potato the other potatoes, and you won't want to, you know, commit because you're playing Warchief for mapping. So, yes, the links to all of these will be down below, as well as a link to Ryze's very good ED Contagion YouTube video, as well as a link to Carve's Twitch. Please do get Carve a new webcam. We want to get him back on the Baycast with that glorious HD. Getting a decent webcam is like, you know, 30, 40 quid, so it should be realistic. If, you know, some of my subs go over that, should be able to knock it out. But yes, I'm Tarke. What I will be playing for the upcoming race will depend entirely on what the ladder is looking like. Again, I am leaving on the 3rd. I'm visiting Grill in Ireland for 3 days. I come back on the night of the 6th. If I decide I'm playing a Freeze Pulse / Frostbolt character, when I get back that night, I will get to Act 5 to grab 1 Threshold Jewel. I'll then go to sleep. I'll then make my second character to get the 2nd Threshold Jewel, and just do smooth leveling with the first one. And then we'll go on and start racing with Assassin Freeze / Frostbolt. If Elementalist is looking like there's not too much competition, I'll YOLO an Elementalist since I've been guaranteed the day 1 Impulsor drop. If Elementalist is looking packed, I'm not feeling Assassin. Saboteur, like, my heart is always with Saboteur. I love Saboteur. Sab is Bay. The one person I'm frightened of in the hardcore SF ladder is Tholfos. Tholfos has said he will be participating, but he also said in the same breath, to be honest, Tarke, I'm going to absolutely destroy ladder and then get bored and, like, rip to Shaper or something, so you should be able to get the free win. I'm like, fair enough. So if you were to ask me right now, I'm leaning towards Saboteur, Assassin, Elementalist. Pathfinder is if I'm really desperate. Also, one of the issues you have with Pathfinder, well, no one really rolls Pathfinder off the bat in SSF. Pathfinder is a very popular ascendancy to reroll onto once you've died. If someone like Ryze died on his Deadeye character, and then he's like, hang on, Deadeye's still pretty competitive, but I've got the gear to quickly make a Pathfinder wonder. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Sunder, if you've started with Sunder from the get-go, you should be able to compete. But if you're going for a slower Pathfinder build, yeah, good luck, mate. Chieftain's pretty safe bet. Assassin's pretty safe bet. Inquiz is very undervalued. It was very underplayed in 3.2, but that might just be because it's considered boring now, since all the other ascendancies got so much rework. Inquiz is one of the best caster speed clearers. And then the Guardian is like a pain, but once you get it going, boy, do you get it going. So yes, this will probably be my last video before I come back. So thank you. I'll see you in a couple of days. Have a good day. Bye-bye.